Case 1. Scott Peterson. A 30-year-old man drives 90 miles from his home on Christmas Eve, telling police he went fishing alone in the San Francisco Bay. His wife, 7.5 months pregnant, is reported missing that same evening. By the following April, her remains and those of her unborn son wash ashore just miles from where he claims to have dropped his fishing line. That is where this story begins. Scott Lee Peterson was born on October 24, 1972, in San Diego, California. He attended California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, earning a degree in agricultural business in 1998. Lacey Denise Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California. She also attended Cal Poly, where she and Scott met in 1994. They married in 1997 and later relocated to Modesto, purchasing a home on Covina Avenue. Scott worked as a sales representative for Trade Corp, a European fertilizer company. Lacey had worked as a substitute teacher. The couple had been anticipating the birth of their first child, a son they planned to name Connor, with a due date of February 10, 2003. What the investigation would later establish is that Scott had entered into a romantic relationship with Amber Fry, a massage therapist in Fresno, beginning in November 2002, approximately 1 month before Lacey's disappearance. On December 9, 2002, Scott told Fry he was a widower and that the upcoming Christmas would be his first without his wife. That same day, he purchased a small aluminum fishing boat, despite having held no fishing license since 1994. On the evening of December 23, Scott and Lacey visited a hair salon together. Lacey's last confirmed phone contact with family occurred at approximately 8:30 that evening, when she spoke with her mother, Sharon Rocha. The following morning, Christmas Eve, December 24, 2002, Scott later told investigators he left the house at approximately 9:30, while Lacey was watching television. He stated he drove to the Berkeley Marina, approximately 90 miles away, to go fishing in San Francisco Bay. A neighbor found the couple's golden retriever alone with a muddy leash that morning at approximately 10:18 to 10:30 and returned him to the yard. Scott later left Lacey a voicemail at 2:15 in the afternoon, stating he was leaving Berkeley. He arrived home to find her absent. He contacted Sharon Rocha to ask whether Lacey was with her. Police received the missing persons report before 6 in the evening on Christmas Eve. Modesto Police Department detectives Alan Brocchini and John Bueller became the lead investigators. The investigation moved quickly. On December 30th, Amber Fry contacted police and disclosed her relationship with Scott, including his claim to be a widower. From that point forward, Fry cooperated fully with investigators, recording her subsequent phone conversations with Scott. The recordings revealed Scott continuing to express romantic interest and affection toward Fry, while simultaneously attending candlelight vigils for his missing wife. On January 24, 2003, Lacey's brother Brent held a press conference revealing the affair, the same day Amber Fry publicly identified herself. Physical evidence accumulated steadily. A homemade concrete anchor was recovered from Scott's warehouse, along with circular impressions in the dust suggesting additional anchors had been created. A receipt for a 90-pound bag of cement was found. A single strand of dark hair, matching Lacey's mitochondrial DNA profile, was recovered from a pair of needle-nosed pliers in the boat. A law enforcement canine detected Lacey's scent at the Berkeley Marina boat ramp. Computer records showed Scott had researched Berkeley Marina, bay currents, and tidal patterns prior to Christmas Eve. Investigators also documented that Scott held a $250,000 life insurance policy on Lacey. On April 13, 2003, the remains of a male fetus were discovered at Point Isabel Regional Shoreline in Richmond, California. On April 14th, a human torso was recovered approximately 1 mile away in the shoreline riprap. On April 18th, DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Lacey and the infant, later named Connor. That same day, Scott Peterson was arrested in La Jolla, California. At the time of his arrest, he had altered his physical appearance with bleached hair and a new beard, was carrying approximately $15,000 in cash, multiple cellular phones, and his brother's identification card. Investigators believed he had been preparing to leave the country. The trial was moved from Stanislaus County to San Mateo County due to the extensive pretrial publicity. Judge Alfred DeLucci presided. Prosecutors Rick DeStaso, Birgit Fladager, and Dave Harris presented the state's case. Defense attorney Mark Garagos argued the evidence was entirely circumstantial. The trial began June 1, 2004. The prosecution called 174 witnesses. Amber Frey testified on August 10, 2004, and the jury heard a significant portion of the recorded phone conversations. The prosecution's central theory held that Scott killed Lacey on the night of December 23 or the morning of December 24, transported her body to the Berkeley Marina, and disposed of it in San Francisco Bay, a location directly connected to his fishing alibi. The motive presented was his desire to exit the marriage and pursue his relationship with Frey, free from the responsibilities of fatherhood. On November 12, 2004, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Lacey and guilty on the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Connor. On December 13, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. On March 16, 2005, Judge DeLucci imposed that sentence. Post-conviction proceedings have been extensive. On August 24, 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence, ruling the trial court had improperly dismissed prospective jurors during the penalty phase. The murder convictions were upheld. On December 8, 2021, Peterson was re-sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2023, the Los Angeles Innocence Project accepted his case. In April 2025, they filed an 854-page petition citing new evidence connected to a burglary that occurred near the Peterson home on the day of Lacey's disappearance. As of this recording, Peterson remains incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. The case became a landmark in American true crime documentation because it combined several elements rarely seen together. A pregnant victim vanishing on Christmas Eve, a husband with a clandestine relationship, remains washing ashore near his stated location on the day she disappeared, and a defendant whose behavior before and after the disappearance became central to the prosecution's case. The investigation demonstrated the evidentiary value of cell phone records, digital search history, canine forensics, and DNA analysis, methods that, taken individually, offered incomplete pictures, but assembled together formed the framework of the prosecution's circumstantial case. If you are watching this and finding it informative, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to Crime Document. Your support makes this research possible. Case 2. Chris Watts. A neighbor's home security camera shows a man loading objects into his work truck before sunrise and driving away. His pregnant wife and 2 young daughters are never seen alive again. Within 48 hours, law enforcement has GPS data, a failed polygraph, and a confession that collapses under the weight of forensic evidence. This is a case where modern technology solved everything, and where the defendant's own lies became the bridge to the truth. Christopher Lee Watts was born on May 16, 1985, in Spring Lake, North Carolina. Sean and Catherine Rozusek was born on January 10, 1984, in Aberdeen, North Carolina, to Frank and Sandra Rozusek. The couple met through Facebook in 2010 and married on November 3, 2012, in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. They subsequently relocated to Frederick, Colorado, purchasing a 5-bedroom home at 2825 Saratoga Trail. The couple declared bankruptcy in 2015. Christopher worked as an oil and gas field operator for Anadarko Petroleum. Shannon was a distributor for Louvel Thrive, a multi-level marketing company, and maintained an active presence on social media documenting what she presented as a thriving family life. Their children were Bella Marie Watts, born December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine Watts, born July 17, 2015. Shannon was 15 weeks pregnant with the couple's 3rd child, a son they intended to name Nico, at the time of the crimes. Beginning in approximately June 2018, Christopher had entered into a romantic relationship with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger. At approximately 1:48 in the morning on August 13, 2018, Shannon returned home from a business trip to Arizona, dropped off by her friend Nicole Atkinson. This arrival was captured on a neighbor's home security camera system. The following morning, Nicole Atkinson became concerned when Shannon did not appear for a scheduled medical appointment. Atkinson went to the Watts residence. When there was no answer at the door, she contacted Frederick police. Officers who responded found Shanann's purse, identification, keys, phone, and prescription medications inside the home. Both children's car seats were located in the garage. None of the family members were present. The investigation was opened immediately. On August 14th, neighbor Nathan Trinastick provided footage from his home security camera. Analysis of the footage showed Christopher leaving the property in his Anadarko work truck that morning, with no footage of Shanann or the children departing. This directly contradicted Christopher's initial claim that Shanann had left the home with the girls following a domestic argument. On August 15th, investigators administered a polygraph examination to Christopher. The results indicated deception. Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent Tammy Lee led the subsequent interrogation. During that interview, Christopher provided a revised account, acknowledging that Shanann had died in the home but directing suspicion elsewhere. He then agreed to drive investigators to the Anadarko Survey 319 oil site in Weld County, approximately 45 minutes from the family home. Shanann's remains were recovered near the site. Bella, age 4, and Celeste, age 3, were recovered from inside sealed oil storage tanks on the property. The cause of death for Shanann was determined to be manual strangulation. The cause of death for Bella and Celeste was determined to be asphyxia. Oxycodone was detected in Shanann's system. Christopher later admitted administering it. Forensic analysis confirmed hair consistent with Bella's was recovered from the edge of a tank hatch. GPS tracking data from Christopher's company vehicle provided a precise record of his movements that morning, directing investigators precisely to the location of the remains. On November 6, 2018, Christopher Watts entered guilty pleas to all 9 charges: 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a human body. The plea agreement removed the death penalty from consideration, a condition requested by Shanann's family. On November 19, 2018, Judge Marcelo Kopkow imposed sentence: 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, 2 concurrent life terms, and 84 additional years. The judge described the crimes as among the most inhumane he had encountered in his judicial career. On February 18, 2019, following his transfer to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, Christopher participated in a 5-hour recorded interview with FBI agents and Colorado investigators. During this session, he provided a detailed account of the events of August 13th, including information about the sequence of events he had not previously disclosed. He acknowledged that he had planned the crimes over a period of weeks. The interview was later made available to the public through document request, and its contents have been widely reported. The Netflix documentary, American Murder: The Family Next Door, released September 30, 2020, drew heavily on Shanann's own social media material and became one of the most-watched true crime documentaries on the platform. The case prompted renewed national discussion around the relationship between domestic violence risk factors and custody proceedings, as well as the role of social media documentation in criminal investigations. The Watts case illustrates several important investigative developments. Home security camera networks in residential neighborhoods provided timeline evidence within hours. GPS fleet tracking in commercial vehicles created irrefutable location data. Polygraph examinations, while not admissible as evidence, functioned as investigative tools that accelerated confession. And the cooperation between local, state, and federal agencies allowed the case to be resolved, from missing persons report to guilty plea, in under 3 months. If this documentary is useful to you, please subscribe to Crime Doc and leave a comment below to let us know what topics you want covered next. Case 3. Drew Peterson. A police sergeant with 30 years on the job has his 3rd wife's death reclassified from accidental drowning to homicide, 3 years after the original investigation closed. His 4th wife then vanishes entirely. The case generates a new Illinois law, introduces hearsay testimony to a murder trial, and results in one of the most unusual sentencing outcomes in American criminal history. Drew Walter Peterson was born on January 5, 1954, in Bolingbrook, Illinois. He joined the Bolingbrook Police Department and served as a sergeant for approximately 30 years, receiving the department's Officer of the Year recognition in 1979. His 2nd wife, Victoria Connolly, had previously reported to investigators that Peterson made threatening statements to her, including a claim that he knew how to cause death and make it appear accidental. Peterson's third wife, Kathleen Savio, was born on June 13, 1963. She and Peterson married on May 3, 1992, and had 2 sons together. Between 2002 and 2004, law enforcement records document that police were called to the couple's home on 18 separate occasions for domestic disturbance complaints. During divorce proceedings, Savio submitted a written statement to the Will County State's Attorney's Office expressing concern that Peterson might cause her harm. Their divorce was finalized on October 10, 2003. Peterson's fourth wife, Stacy Ann Callis, was born on January 20, 1984. She and Peterson married on October 18, 2003, when she was 19 and he was 49. She had been in a relationship with Peterson since age 17, while he was still married to Savio. On March 1, 2004, Kathleen Savio was found without life in the master bathroom of her Bolingbrook residence. She was 40 years old. The first autopsy was conducted by Dr. Brian Mitchell. A coroner's jury subsequently ruled the death an accidental drowning. One jury member was a police officer who personally knew Peterson. Questions about the thoroughness of that original investigation would be raised extensively in subsequent proceedings. The case was reopened after a critical new development. On October 28, 2007, Stacy Peterson, then 23 years old, disappeared. Peterson reported that she had called to say she was leaving him for another man. Stacy's sister Cassandra Callis filed a missing persons report. The disappearance prompted investigators to re-examine the circumstances of Kathleen Savio's death. On November 13, 2007, Kathleen Savio's body was exhumed. Forensic pathologist Dr. Larry Blum performed a second autopsy. His findings reversed the original ruling entirely. Dr. Blum documented a 2-inch laceration on the back of the skull inconsistent with the bathtub environment, extensive bruising throughout the lower body at a depth indicating significant force, hemorrhaging in the chest muscles, no presence of alcohol or drugs in the system, and a body position inconsistent with an accidental fall. The official manner of death was reclassified from accident to homicide. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden independently reviewed the findings and reached the same conclusion. On May 7, 2009, Drew Peterson was indicted and arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. Bail was set at $20 million. The case generated significant legislative attention. In 2008, Illinois enacted what became known informally as Drew's Law, formally amending the state's evidence code to allow admission of hearsay statements from witnesses who were unavailable to testify because the defendant had caused their unavailability. This evidentiary standard was directly applicable to the Savio and Stacy Peterson cases. The trial commenced July 31, 2012, in the Will County Courthouse before Judge Edward Burmala. The prosecution was led by Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow. Defense was led by Joel Brodsky. Hearsay statements admitted under the new law included a written statement from Kathleen Savio describing an incident in which Peterson threatened her at knife point, and statements Stacy Peterson had made to Reverend Neil Scory in which she indicated Peterson had told her he was responsible for Kathleen's death. Additional testimony came from Jeff Pachter, who stated that Peterson had offered him $25,000 to arrange for someone to cause Kathleen's death. Defense attorney Brodsky called Kathleen Savio's divorce attorney Harry Smith, who testified that Stacy Peterson had contacted him about leveraging her knowledge of Peterson's involvement in Savio's death during the divorce proceedings. Prosecutors characterized this testimony as significantly damaging to the defense. Several jurors stated after the trial that without the hearsay testimony, they likely would have voted to acquit. On September 6, 2012, the jury found Drew Peterson guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Kathleen Savio. On February 21, 2013, he was sentenced to 38 years in prison. The case then took an additional turn. While incarcerated, Peterson recruited a fellow inmate, Antonio Smith, who was a member of the Satan's Disciples gang, to arrange the killing of State's Attorney James Glasgow for a payment of $10,000. Smith cooperated with federal authorities and recorded subsequent conversations with Peterson while wearing a wire. Peterson was convicted on May 31, 2016, and sentenced to an additional 40 consecutive years, meaning his earliest possible release would not occur until 2081. Scott Peterson has never been found. No body has been recovered. No homicide charge related to her disappearance has been filed. Her case remains classified as a missing persons investigation. The Peterson case significantly influenced the development of evidentiary law, particularly regarding hearsay exceptions and the forfeiture by wrongdoing doctrine. It demonstrated how a prior accidental death ruling could be overturned through forensic re-examination, and it remains one of the clearest examples of how a defendant's position within law enforcement shaped the initial investigation's outcome. Please subscribe to Crime Doc if you want to continue following this series. Case 4. Martin McNeil. A physician with degrees in medicine and law calls 911 to report his wife unresponsive in the bathtub, less than 2 weeks after he arranged for her to undergo an elective procedure and personally selected her post-operative medication regimen. His own children refused to accept the initial ruling. 5 years later, a jury convicts him of first-degree murder. Martin Joseph McNeil was born on February 1, 1956. He held a degree in osteopathic medicine and a law degree from Brigham Young University and served as medical director of the Utah State Development Center. He also held the title of bishop in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Investigators later documented that he had falsified university transcripts, obtained convictions for forgery and fraud in other jurisdictions, and had been conducting an affair with a woman named Gypsy Jyll Willis beginning in November 2005. Michelle Marie McNeil, born January 15, 1957, was a homemaker and former beauty queen, Miss Concord 1976. She and Martin married on February 21, 1978, and had 8 children together. Their daughter Alexis, later known professionally as Alexis Summers, would become the central figure in pursuing a murder investigation. In March 2007, Martin pressured Michelle into undergoing a facelift, despite her expressed preference to first address an elevated blood pressure condition. On April 1, Martin provided the operating surgeon, Dr. Scott Thompson, with a written list of medications he wanted prescribed for Michelle's post-operative recovery. The list included Lortab, Ambien, Valium, Percocet, Phenergan, and Keflex, a combination that Thompson testified was significantly beyond what he would ordinarily have prescribed. Michelle underwent the surgery on April 3, 2007. On April 6, Michelle told her daughter Alexis, "If anything happens to me, make sure it was not your dad." Alexis returned to medical school in Las Vegas on April 10. On April 11, 2007, at 8:44 in the morning, Michelle spoke with Alexis by phone and reported she was recovering adequately. At 9:10, Martin called Alexis expressing concern. Between 11:35 and 11:46, Martin returned home with their youngest daughter Ada and found Michelle unresponsive in the bathtub. He called 911. First responders were unable to revive her. Michelle McNeil was pronounced deceased that same day. On the day of his wife's death, phone records documented that Martin communicated with Gypsy Willis through 2 phone calls and approximately 30 text messages. Following Michelle's death, he subsequently moved Willis into the family home, presenting her initially as a nanny. The original autopsy attributed death to cardiovascular disease. The manner of death was ruled natural. However, Michelle's daughters, particularly Alexis, immediately raised concerns with investigators and began their own documented campaign to have the case reopened. In January 2008, the Utah County Sheriff's Office formally reopened the investigation, assigning detectives Doug Whitney and Jeff Robinson. In October 2010, Dr. Todd Gray, serving as Utah's chief medical examiner, reviewed the complete case file and revised the cause of death to combined effects of heart disease and drug toxicity, and the manner of death to undetermined. Toxicological analysis documented the presence of diazepam, oxycodone, promethazine, and zolpidem in Michelle's system, a combination that, according to expert testimony, would produce profound sedation inconsistent with safe functioning. On August 24, 2012, Martin McNeil was charged with first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. The trial began October 17, 2013, before Judge Derek Pullen in Utah's 4th District Court. Chief Prosecutor Chad Grunender led the state's case. Defense attorneys were Randall Spencer and Suzanne Guston. Testimony was presented by daughters Alexis and Rachel, by Ada McNeil, who had been 6 years old at the time and was 12 during trial, by Dr. Thompson regarding the unusual medication requests, and by 5 individuals who had been incarcerated with Martin McNeil. One of those individuals testified that McNeil stated he was getting away with his murder. A previous romantic partner, Anna Osborne Walthall, testified that McNeil had told her there was a method of causing death that would present as a natural cardiac event. The prosecution presented a specific theory that the drug combination, given in quantities Martin had specifically arranged, was the mechanism of death, and that Martin had orchestrated it to free himself for his relationship with Willis. On November 9, 2013, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on both counts. Judge Pullen sentenced McNeil on September 19, 2014, to 15 years to life on the murder conviction, with consecutive terms for obstruction and an additional conviction for sexual abuse of a family member, totaling a minimum effective sentence of 17 years to life. McNeil appealed his conviction. The Utah Court of Appeals affirmed the verdict in 2017. On April 9, 2017, Martin McNeil was found without life at the Utah State Prison. His death was officially ruled a suicide. The case is studied for several reasons. It demonstrates the critical role of family persistence in reopening inadequate initial investigations. It illustrates the forensic significance of toxicological analysis in deaths initially attributed to natural causes. And it raises ongoing questions about how medical credentials and professional standing can initially deflect investigative scrutiny, a pattern that allowed 5 years to pass between Michelle's death and the filing of charges. Case 5. Neil Entwistle. A man in financial collapse, with active fraud investigations against him and mounting debt, purchases a one-way airline ticket in the early hours of the morning and departs for England. His wife and infant daughter are found in their Massachusetts home. The murder weapon belongs to his wife's stepfather. His palm print and DNA are on the grip. The internet search history records queries about methods of killing, dated 2 days before the deaths. This is the evidence in the Entwistle case. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978, in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England. He attended the University of York, where he met Rachel Souza, an American student from the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, who was studying abroad. They married on August 23, 2003, in Plymouth, England. Their daughter, Lillian Rose Entwistle, was born on April 9, 2005. In late 2005, the family relocated to the United States, renting a 4-bedroom colonial home at a monthly cost of $2,700 in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. What Rachel did not know was that Neil had been unemployed since September 2005. He had accumulated over $30,000 in credit card debt. He was under investigation by eBay for fraudulent activity, including misrepresentation of products sold through various online schemes. Multiple ventures he had attempted, including a pornography website, had generated minimal income. On January 16 and 17, 2006, records from the family shared computer-documented searches including the phrases "how to kill with a knife" and "knife in neck kill." These searches were made from within the Hopkinton residence. On January 20, 2006, Rachel Souza Entwistle, age 27, was killed inside the master bedroom of the family home. Lillian, 9 months old, was killed in the same incident. Both were found in the bed, covered with bedding. A .22 caliber Colt revolver belonging to Rachel's stepfather Joseph Matarazzo was the weapon used. Following the killings, Neil returned the firearm to the Matarazzo home before leaving the country. At approximately 5 in the morning on January 21, Neil purchased a one-way ticket with British Airways. He boarded an 8:15 flight from Logan International Airport to England. On the evening of January 21, friends went to the Hopkinton home after being unable to reach Rachel. Officers Sergeant Michael Sutton and Officer Aaron O'Neill conducted an initial inspection but did not locate the victims, who were concealed under the bedding. On January 22, a more thorough search was conducted and Rachel and Lillian were discovered in the master bedroom. The investigation was led jointly by Hopkinton Police, Massachusetts State Police, and the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office under Martha Coakley. British authorities and Interpol were engaged for the international component. Forensic analysis of the firearm recovered from the Matarazzo home found Neil's DNA and palm print on the grip. Rachel's blood was detected on and inside the muzzle. Keys to the Matarazzo home were found in the BMW Neil had left at Logan Airport. The computer search history was forensically extracted and presented as evidence. Phone records documented Neil's movements and communications in the days before and after the killings. On January 23rd, Trooper Robert Manning reached Neil by telephone at his parents' home in England. The 2-hour recorded call became significant trial evidence. In it, Neil claimed to have discovered his family already deceased, retrieved the Matarazzo gun intending self-harm, but then decided instead to fly to England. He did not explain why he purchased a one-way ticket before, according to his account, discovering the bodies. Neil Entwistle was arrested in England on approximately February 8th or 9th, 2006. He waived extradition proceedings and was arraigned at Framingham District Court, entering a plea of not guilty. The trial opened June 2, 2008, in Middlesex County Superior Court before Judge Diane Cotmere. Prosecutor Michael L. Fabry called over 40 witnesses across the trial. The defense, led by Elliot Weinstein and Stephanie Page, did not call any witnesses. The defense theory advanced a murder-suicide scenario in which Rachel killed Lillian and then herself, but prosecutors noted the theory could not account for how the firearm returned to the Matarazzo home after Rachel's death. Forensic evidence was also inconsistent with the self-inflicted scenario. On June 25, 2008, the jury found Neil Entwistle guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. He received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court rejected his appeal on August 14, 2012. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case in January 2013. Entwistle has filed additional motions for a new trial in subsequent years. As of the latest public filings in 2023, those efforts have not succeeded. He remains incarcerated at Old Colony Correctional Center in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. The case is instructive on several fronts. Internet search history became central prosecution evidence. Among the earlier cases in which online behavior was systematically documented and presented to a jury. The international dimension required coordination across jurisdictions. The forensic ballistics evidence, DNA and print on the weapon, biological material in the muzzle, was straightforward and direct. And the flight pattern, the one-way ticket purchased before dawn, placed the defendant outside the country before the victims were discovered, a sequence the prosecution argued was deliberate. Case 6. Michael Peterson. A novelist calls 911 in the early morning to report his wife has fallen down the stairs. When investigators arrive, they find 7 lacerations on the back of her skull, a massive blood pool at the bottom of the staircase, and a victim whose injuries are inconsistent with the fall described. 22 years of proceedings follow, including a vacated conviction, a key expert's firing for fraud, and an Alford plea that remains one of the most debated outcomes in North Carolina criminal history. Michael Evere Peterson was born on October 23, 1943. He was a Vietnam War veteran, a published novelist, and a newspaper columnist in Durham, North Carolina. He had 2 sons from his first marriage and had adopted 2 additional daughters, Margaret and Martha Ratliff, after the death of their mother, Elizabeth Ratliff, a family friend who had been found deceased at the bottom of a staircase in West Germany in November 1985. Kathleen Hunt Atwater was born on February 21, 1953. She was widely regarded as a pioneer in her field, among the first female students admitted to Duke University's School of Engineering, and had built a career as a senior technology executive, serving as Director of Information Services at Nortel Networks with a salary of approximately $145,000 annually. She held a life insurance policy valued at $1.8 million. Michael and Kathleen married in 1997. They lived in a 14-room mansion in Durham's Forest Hills neighborhood. Financial records later revealed the household carried approximately $142,000 in credit card debt and was spending roughly $100,000 more per year than it earned. On the evening of December 8, 2001, the couple spent the evening at home, having dinner and watching a film. At approximately 2:40 in the morning on December 9th, Michael placed two 911 calls reporting Kathleen had fallen down the back staircase. Paramedics arrived to find Kathleen's body at the bottom of the staircase in a significant pool of blood. Medical examiner Dr. Deborah Radish concluded that death resulted from blood loss occurring between 90 minutes and 2 hours after the injuries were sustained, and classified the manner as homicidal assault. She documented 7 lacerations on the top and back of the skull, along with a fracture of the left thyroid cartilage. Despite the 7 head lacerations, there was no skull fracture and no brain injury, a finding the defense would later argue was inconsistent with a bludgeoning scenario. Prior to trial, prosecutors subpoenaed records relating to Elizabeth Ratliff's death in Germany. Her body was exhumed from Texas in April 2003. A new autopsy reclassified her cause of death from natural causes to homicide. Peterson had been the last known person to see Ratliff alive. Computer forensic analysis of Peterson's computer also revealed emails with male escorts and related content. The prosecution would later argue that Kathleen had discovered this material and that a confrontation followed. The trial began July 1, 2003, in Durham County Superior Court before Judge Orlando Hudson. Prosecutors Jim Hardin Jr. and Frida Black argued for a murder conviction. Defense attorney David Rudolph retained a prominent forensic team, including Dr. Henry Lee. The prosecution introduced as a possible murder weapon a custom fireplace tool called a blow poke, a gift from Kathleen's sister that was unaccounted for. In a notable moment during trial, the defense produced the blow poke, arguing it had never been missing and undermining the prosecution's weapon theory. The prosecution's blood evidence analysis was conducted by North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation analyst Dwayne Deaver, who testified regarding blood spatter patterns consistent with homicidal assault. Deaver was later found by a court to have provided materially misleading and deliberately false testimony in this and other cases. He was dismissed from the SBI in January 2011. French filmmaker Jean-Xavier de Lestrade began documenting the case within weeks of Peterson's arrest. The resulting documentary series, The Staircase, became a landmark in the true crime documentary genre, later distributed through Netflix. On October 10, 2003, the jury convicted Michael Peterson of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. On December 14, 2011, Judge Hudson vacated the conviction following a hearing at which Deaver's discredited testimony was the central issue. Peterson was released on $300,000 bail. The case was set for retrial. On February 24, 2017, Michael Peterson entered an Alford plea to voluntary manslaughter, a procedure in which a defendant accepts a conviction while formally maintaining innocence, acknowledging only that the available evidence was sufficient for a jury to convict. He was sentenced to time already served, which amounted to approximately 98 months. He was released. Kathleen's daughter, Caitlin Atwater, had previously filed a wrongful death civil action, which settled for $25 million. Peterson, now 82, continues to reside in Durham. The case generated considerable academic and legal discussion around the reliability of bloodstain pattern analysis as a forensic discipline. The discrediting of Deaver directly affected 34 cases in North Carolina in which he had testified. The Peterson case is among the most extensively documented examples of what happens when expert forensic testimony is later found to be unreliable, and of the legal mechanisms available, including Alford pleas, when retrials prove procedurally complex. Case 7. Robert Durst. A billionaire real estate heir's wife vanishes in 1982. 18 years later, his closest friend is found killed in Los Angeles days before she is scheduled to be interviewed by investigators. 1 year after that, a neighbor is found deceased in Galveston Bay, and Durst is acquitted, despite his own admission that he dismembered the body. Then, in 2015, a documentary microphone records a statement that leads directly to his arrest. This case spans 4 decades and 3 states. Robert Allen Durst was born on April 12, 1943, in New York City. His family controlled the Durst Organization, one of New York's major real estate enterprises. His mother died by suicide when he was 7 years old. Robert was eventually bought out of the family's real estate trust for approximately $65 million in 2006, following a prolonged estrangement from his brother Douglas. Kathleen McCormick Durst was born circa 1950. She and Robert married on April 12, 1973. By early 1982, Kathleen was completing her fourth year of medical school at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Family and friends documented a troubled marriage. Approximately 3 weeks before she disappeared, Kathleen was treated for facial injuries. On January 31, 1982, Kathleen attended a dinner party in Connecticut, departed after receiving a call from Robert, and was never seen again. Robert initially told investigators he drove her to a train station. He later admitted this account was false. He did not report her missing until 5 days after she was last seen. The case remained officially unresolved. Susan Berman was a close friend of Durst from their time at UCLA together. She was also a published author and journalist. Following Kathleen's disappearance, Berman served as an unofficial spokesperson for Durst and, investigators later established, had provided him with a false alibi during that period. On an estimated date of December 23, 2000, Berman was found killed in her Benedict Canyon home in Los Angeles, a single gunshot wound to the back of the skull. She was discovered 3 days later. Her death came just weeks before New York State investigators had planned to interview her as part of a renewed inquiry into Kathleen's disappearance. An anonymous note was mailed to Beverly Hills police containing Berman's address and the word cadaver, with the city name misspelled as Beverly Hills. The author of that note was unknown for years. In April 2001, Robert Durst moved to Galveston, Texas, where he rented a room disguised as an elderly woman using the name Dorothy Sinaire. On or around September 28, 2001, his neighbor Morris Black, age 71, was killed. On September 30th, a 13-year-old boy discovered a human torso floating in Galveston Bay. Subsequent searches recovered additional remains in plastic bags. Durst was arrested on October 9th. He posted bail, missed a subsequent court hearing, and became a fugitive. He was captured on November 30th at a supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, despite having substantial cash and 2 firearms in his possession. At trial in 2003 before Judge Susan Criss, defense attorneys Dick DeGuerin and Mike Ramsey presented a self-defense theory. Durst testified, acknowledging that he disposed of Black's remains. Because Black's head was never recovered, prosecutors could not present forensic evidence sufficient to rebut the self-defense claim. On November 11, 2003, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty. In 2015, HBO's documentary series, The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, brought renewed attention to all 3 cases. During the filming process, Susan Berman's stepson located a letter Durst had sent to Berman containing the same Beverly Hills misspelling as the anonymous cadaver note. The handwriting and phrasing were compared forensically to the original cadaver note. The match provided the most direct evidence, yet linking Durst to Berman's death. In a sequence that has since become widely referenced in documentary filmmaking, Durst was recorded in what appeared to be an unguarded moment. His microphone still active when he stepped away from the interview setting. In the recording, he is heard saying, among other things, "What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." On March 14, 2015, Robert Durst was arrested in New Orleans on a warrant charging first-degree murder in the death of Susan Berman. His trial in Los Angeles County Superior Court before Judge Mark Wyndham, prosecuted by Deputy District Attorney John Lewin, was scheduled to begin in March 2020. COVID-19 protocols caused significant delays. Trial resumed in 2021. On September 17, 2021, the jury convicted Durst of first-degree murder with special circumstances. He was sentenced to life without parole. On October 22, 2021, Westchester County, New York, filed a second-degree murder charge against Durst in connection with Kathleen McCormick's disappearance and presumed death. Durst died on January 10, 2022, at age 78, while serving his sentence. Under California law, his conviction was automatically vacated because he died before his appeal was resolved, a procedural outcome that sparked widespread discussion about appellate rights and posthumous justice. Kathleen McCormick Durst has never been found. Case 8. John Battaglia. A court order prohibits a man from possessing firearms. At the time of his arrest, 16 firearms are recovered from his residence. A protective order required supervised contact with his children. On the evening of May 2, 2001, his ex-wife is on the phone with her daughters when the call goes silent. This is a case where the evidence begins with a live witness and ends 20 years later with an execution. John David Battaglia Jr. was born on August 2, 1955, in Dallas, Texas. He worked as a certified public accountant. His first marriage, to Michelle Getty, ended following documented violent incidents, including an assault that occurred while she was holding their infant daughter. He married Mary Jean Pearl on April 6, 1991. They had 2 daughters, Mary Faith Battaglia, born approximately 1992, and Liberty May Battaglia, born approximately 1995. At Christmas of 1999, Battaglia attacked Mary Jean Pearl in the family home in front of the children. He entered a guilty plea to misdemeanor assault and received 2 years probation. Their divorce was finalized in August 2000. The divorce decree included an agreed protective order explicitly prohibiting Battaglia from possessing firearms. On the evening of May 2, 2001, Pearl dropped Faith, age 9, and Liberty, age 6, at Battaglia's residence for a scheduled visitation dinner. After arriving at a friend's house, Pearl called the residence. Battaglia answered and placed the call on speakerphone. During the call, Pearl heard both children's voices and then heard sounds that indicated both girls had been fatally injured. Battaglia said, "Merry Christmas." It was a reference to the 1999 assault that had led to his criminal conviction. Pearl immediately contacted law enforcement. Battaglia subsequently left the residence. He went to a bar and then to a tattoo parlor, where he had 2 red roses, representing his daughters, tattooed on his arm. At approximately 1 in the morning, police located Battaglia outside the tattoo parlor. Officers required the assistance of 4 individuals to take him into custody. A subsequent search of his apartment recovered 16 firearms. Faith Battaglia, age 9, and Liberty Battaglia, age 6, had both died from gunshot wounds inside the apartment. The capital murder trial commenced April 22, 2002, at the Frank Crowley Courts building in Dallas County. Prosecutor Howard Blackman presented phone records corroborating Mary Jean Pearl's account of the call. Physical evidence, forensic pathology reports, and the defendant's own subsequent behavior all supported the prosecution's case. The jury deliberated for approximately 19 minutes before returning a verdict of guilty on the charge of capital murder. On April 30th, the jury imposed a sentence of death. The post-conviction phase extended for nearly 2 decades. Battaglia filed multiple appeals and raised claims of mental incompetence to be executed, asserting an elaborate conspiracy involving his ex-wives, prosecutors, and other parties. On September 20, 2017, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals dismissed these claims in a 78-page opinion, finding the evidence strongly suggested the incompetency claims were not genuine. The court authorized the scheduled execution to proceed. On February 1, 2018, John David Battaglia Jr. was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. He was 62 years old. Mary Jean Pearl was present during the execution. He was pronounced deceased at 9:40 in the evening. The case generated direct policy outcomes. Texas Senate Bill 140 was passed in part as a response to this case, requiring courts to give more substantial weight to a parent's documented history of domestic violence when making custody and visitation determinations. Faith and Liberty's Place, a supervised visitation facility, was established in memory of the 2 girls. The Battaglia case illustrates how domestic violence escalation can follow a documented, predictable trajectory, and how institutional responses failed to prevent the final outcome despite multiple prior convictions, documented violence, and court-issued protective orders. The protective order was in place. The firearms prohibition was legally binding. Neither was enforced effectively enough to prevent what happened on May 2, 2001. Case 9, Timothy Jones Jr. A man drives for 9 days through multiple states with the remains of 5 children in his vehicle. He is stopped at a routine traffic checkpoint. Officers notice irregularities. A welfare check on 5 missing children leads investigators to a rural road in Alabama. What follows is one of the most extensively prosecuted familicide cases in South Carolina history. Timothy Ray Jones Jr. was born on December 28, 1981, in Chicago, Illinois. His childhood was marked by instability. His mother left the family when he was 18 months old. He was convicted of cocaine possession and check forgery in 2001 and served approximately 2 years in custody. He subsequently completed his education, graduating from Mississippi State University in 2011 with a degree in computer engineering. He secured a position as an engineer with Intel in Columbia, South Carolina, earning approximately $71,000 per year. He had met Amber Kaiser in Chicago, and the couple married in June 2004. They had 5 children: Mara Gracie, age 8, Elias, age 7, Naughton, age 6, Gabriel, age 2, and Abigail Elaine, age 1. Their divorce was finalized in October 2013. Following proceedings in which Jones alleged neglect, he was granted full custody of all 5 children. In 2014, the South Carolina Department of Social Services opened 2 separate investigations into allegations of child abuse against Jones. Neither investigation had been concluded at the time the crimes occurred. On August 28, 2014, Jones picked up his children from Sachs-Gotha Elementary School and from daycare. According to the account Jones provided to investigators, an incident involving 6-year-old Naughton triggered a physical confrontation that ended in the child's death inside the family's mobile home at 2155B South Lake Drive in Red Bank, Lexington County. Jones subsequently caused the deaths of the 4 remaining children inside the residence. Jones placed the children's remains in black plastic bags and loaded them into his Cadillac Escalade. He then drove a route that took him through multiple southeastern states across a period of approximately 9 days, from South Carolina through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, before being stopped. On September 3rd, he purchased large plastic containers, cutting implements, and chemicals at a Walmart location. On September 6, 2014, Jones was stopped at a routine traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. Officers observed indicators that prompted a more thorough inspection, including blood and items associated with controlled substance production. Records associated with his South Carolina license plate triggered an alert connected to a missing children report. Jones was taken into custody. He subsequently directed investigators to a remote dirt road near Camden, Alabama, where the children's remains had been left. The multi-jurisdictional investigation involved the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the Smith County Sheriff's Office, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Forensic pathologist Dr. Janice Ross conducted all 5 autopsies. All 5 children had died as a result of asphyxia from manual strangulation. Environmental conditions had significantly degraded the remains during the approximately 9-day interval. One child had food material in the stomach, the others did not, raising questions about the conditions under which the children had been living in the period prior to their deaths. The trial proceedings began in 2019 before Judge Eugene C. Griffith, Jr. in Lexington County. The state's case was prosecuted by 11th Judicial Circuit Solicitor Rick Hubbard III. The defense entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, presenting expert testimony regarding Jones's mental state. In one of the most unusual testimonial moments in the case, Amber Kaiser, the children's mother and Jones's former wife, testified for the prosecution while simultaneously asking the jury not to impose the death penalty on Jones. On June 4, 2019, after approximately 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jones guilty on all 5 counts of murder. On June 13, following less than 2 hours of penalty phase deliberation, the jury returned a sentence of death on all 5 counts. On March 29, 2023, the South Carolina Supreme Court issued its opinion affirming both the conviction and the death sentence. Jones remains on death row at a South Carolina correctional facility. The case drew sustained attention for several reasons: the sheer number of child victims, the multi-state nature of the subsequent conduct, the 9-day time frame during which Jones continued driving, Amber Kaiser's extraordinary testimony, and the documented failure of Child Protective Services to complete abuse investigations before the crimes occurred. Advocates and policymakers pointed to the open DSS investigations as evidence of systemic failures that, had they been concluded earlier, might have triggered intervention. Case 10. Jeffrey MacDonald. A Green Beret military surgeon calls Fort Bragg dispatchers at 3:42 in the morning. When military police arrive, they find 3 members of his family dead and the defendant alive with comparatively minor injuries. His account describes a group of intruders. The physical evidence, accumulated over years, tells a different story. The case has been litigated continuously for over 50 years, making it one of the most extensively appealed murder convictions in American legal history. Jeffrey Robert MacDonald was born on October 12, 1943, in Jamaica, Queens, New York. He attended Princeton University on a scholarship and pursued medical school at Northwestern University. He began dating Colette Stevenson in 8th grade. They married on September 14, 1963. Their daughter Kimberly was born April 18, 1964. Their second daughter Kristen was born May 8, 1967. MacDonald was commissioned into the United States Army on June 28, 1969, and volunteered for Special Forces training. He was assigned as a group surgeon at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The family resided at 544 Castle Drive. Colette was approximately 3 months pregnant with the couple's third child at the time of the crimes. Post-conviction investigation established that MacDonald had falsely claimed to have received a Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, and 2 Purple Hearts. At 3:42 in the morning on February 17, 1970, Fort Bragg dispatchers received MacDonald's call. Military police arrived within approximately 10 minutes. The front door was locked and the house was dark. Colette MacDonald, age 26, was found in the master bedroom. Both of her forearms had fractures documented as consistent with defensive positioning. She had been stabbed on multiple occasions. A torn blue pajama top was found draped across her chest. The word, pig, had been written in large letters on the headboard using blood. Kimberly, age 5, was found in her bedroom and had sustained multiple stab wounds and blunt force injuries. Kristen, age 2, was found in her bedroom and had also died from multiple stab wounds. Jeffrey MacDonald was found alive, face down in the hallway, with cuts, contusions, and a single stab wound that had caused a partial collapse of one lung. MacDonald told investigators that 4 intruders had entered the home, 3 males and a white female with long blonde hair wearing a floppy hat, who was chanting phrases referencing drugs and the Manson family. An issue of Esquire magazine containing a lengthy article about the Charles Manson murders was found in the living room. The Army Criminal Investigation Division, led by investigators William Ivory and Franz Joseph Grebner, identified significant inconsistencies. The living room, where MacDonald claimed to have fought 3 armed intruders, showed minimal signs of disturbance. No fibers from MacDonald's pajama top were found in the living room, though fibers were found under Colette's body and in both daughters' bedrooms. Blood typing of the 4 family members, each of whom had a different blood type, produced a pattern of distribution that investigators found inconsistent with the intruder account, but consistent with an alternative sequence of events. The murder weapons, an old hickory kitchen knife, an ice pick, and a piece of lumber, were all traced to the MacDonald household. All had been wiped clean of fingerprints. A blood-stained surgical glove fragment was found under the headboard bearing the written word, an item consistent with MacDonald's medical supplies. The critical forensic analysis came from Paul Stombaugh, chief of the FBI Crime Laboratory Chemistry Section. Stombaugh examined the 48 puncture holes in MacDonald's pajama top and determined they were smooth and cylindrical, consistent with a stationary garment, not one worn during a physical struggle. When the garment was folded as documented in the original crime scene photographs, all 48 puncture holes aligned with 21 penetrating thrusts, the exact number of ice pick wounds documented on Colette's body. An Article 32 hearing in July 1970 before Colonel Warren V. Rock concluded with a recommendation of insufficient evidence to proceed. Charges were dismissed on October 23, 1970. MacDonald received an honorable discharge and relocated to California, establishing a medical practice. Colette's stepfather Alfred Kassab initially supported MacDonald publicly. After MacDonald provided a false account in which he claimed to have personally located and confronted one of the alleged intruders, a claim Kassab later determined was fabricated, Kassab read the full Article 32 transcript and reversed his position entirely. He mounted a sustained personal campaign for federal prosecution. On January 24, 1975, a federal grand jury indicted MacDonald on 3 counts of murder. The federal trial began July 16, 1979, in Raleigh, North Carolina, before Judge Franklin T. Dupree Jr. Prosecutors James Blackburn and Brian Murtaugh presented the government's case. Defense attorneys Bernard Siegel and Wade Smith represented MacDonald. A woman named Helena Stokely, a 17-year-old drug user who had been identified as a possible match for the female intruder described by MacDonald, was called as a witness. On the stand, she denied involvement in the crimes. She died in 1983 at age 31. On August 29, 1979, after 6.5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. MacDonald was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Kristen and second-degree murder in the deaths of Colette and Kimberly. Judge Dupree imposed 3 consecutive life sentences. The conviction was briefly reversed in 1980 on grounds of a speedy trial violation. The United States Supreme Court reinstated it on March 31, 1982 in United States v. MacDonald for 56 U.S. 1. Author Joe McGinnis, whom MacDonald had hired expecting a book favorable to him, published Fatal Vision in 1983, concluding that MacDonald was guilty. The book sold over 1 million copies and was adapted into a 1984 NBC miniseries that became the most-watched television film of 1985. A lawsuit MacDonald filed against McGinnis settled for $325,000 and inspired Janet Malcolm's widely cited work, The Journalist and the Murderer, a study in the ethics of narrative journalism. DNA testing conducted in 2006 found no match between evidence from the crime scene and Stokely or other individuals associated with the defense theory. A 2012 evidentiary hearing examined additional claims. The Fourth Circuit denied relief. MacDonald, now 82 years old, remains incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland, serving 3 consecutive life sentences. He married Catherine Curich in a prison ceremony in 2002 and continues to maintain his innocence through legal counsel. The MacDonald case is considered among the most litigated murder cases in American judicial history. Continuous legal proceedings have extended across more than 5 decades, producing multiple Supreme Court rulings, numerous appellate decisions, and a body of case law touching on speedy trial rights, DNA evidence standards, and the evidentiary standards applicable to newly discovered evidence in federal habeas proceedings. Those are 10 documented, verified cases, 10 families, 10 investigations, 10 sets of court records that trace the path from crime scene to courtroom. Every case in this documentary was drawn from publicly available court documents, appellate decisions, forensic reports, and investigative journalism. Nothing here is speculation. These are the facts as established by the justice system. If you watched this far, we want to say thank you. Crime Doc exists because viewers like you choose to engage with factual, documented content. If this documentary gave you something to think about, hit the like button below. If you want more case studies like this, subscribe to Crime Doc right now so you are notified when the next documentary drops. And if you have a case you think we should cover, leave it in the comments. We read every single one. Thank you for watching Crime Document. We will see you in the next case.